but you see, somebody would then go, well, actually, what you're saying this, and you're in a very comfortable career. You are a man of privilege. You're a white man. Of course, you would say these things because you've never been oppressed.
There's a huge amount of assumptions in that statement.
Yes.
Aren't there?
Yeah.
Firstly, that I have a successful career. I think the jury is very much out on that. If I did have a successful career, I wouldn't be struggling for money all the time. But let's
I
leave
thought you were
that
about to
aside.
say I wouldn't be here.
Well, there's that. No, that would be rude. That would be rude. I wouldn't do that.
I like that. That would be rude. Although accurate, it would be rude.
You see, often the accusation of privilege comes with all kinds of assumptions. And what I've noticed is that people who peddle this idea tend to be from very upper middle class backgrounds. It seems to be a very bourgeois concern, identity politics, at the moment. I'm not saying in all cases, but certainly the most prominent vocal elements of the liberal left tend to have double-barreled names, tend to have, I mean, the books that are being published about this stuff where people are desperate for victimhood tend to be quite well-off people who talk about their holidays in the Pyrenees when they were young and all of this kind of stuff. So I don't know where the assumption that I'm privileged is privilege for me. Of course, people face homophobia and racism and all of this stuff, and we need to stand up against that. But above all else, what privilege comes from money, from contacts, from opportunity, from nepotism, from all of the stuff that middle-class people have. Only 7% of this country are educated at private schools, but they're disproportionately represented in the law, in the media, in journalism, in all of the major, in politics, all of the major positions. So really, if we wanted to sort this out societally, we would address that imbalance. So I would never say to someone, you're privileged because you are white. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, when Munro Bergdorf, the Labour activist, said that you can still be homeless and have white privilege, that is an incredibly insulting thing to say from someone who is so privileged, so upper middle class, and has had all these benefits. But as an ethnic minority and trans person, all of a sudden the victim hierarchy shifts. And so someone who's homeless is suddenly is privileged or potentially privileged. I mean, this is a nonsense. So I think we have to think in terms of class. I think if you're not thinking in terms of class consciousness, you can't really self-identify as left, in my view, although a lot of people on the left do seem to think that by focusing solely, and I must emphasize that I'm not saying that tackling racism and homophobia and sexism isn't important. It's key to what I believe in. What I'm saying is it is often done at the expense of class concerns. Now, it would be one thing if we were covering everything. But that doesn't appear to be, or certainly my reading of it, that is not how things are playing out in a practical sense. So if you say to me, well, my argument is undermined by the fact that I'm white, well, or the fact that I'm male, how do we know that I haven't been disadvantaged in other ways? How do you know? I mean, you don't...
Well, I'm curious about that because we were talking just before we started, actually, and I asked you if you're gay because I read that you did a show where you talked partly about that, and I'm curious that you haven't brought that up in defense of your right to speak. Which I find interesting because that is the instinct most of us now have, isn't it? To kind of go, wait, I'm oppressed as well, therefore I'm allowed to speak.
I think it's irrelevant. I think it would be irrelevant if I were a black gay female. I think the argument is what matters. I think so this is where I think a lot of the liberal left are going wrong. It's that they've forgotten how to argue. We don't have critical thinking at the heart of schooling anymore. I used to teach critical thinking at A-level. It's really, really key and it's important. The first thing you'll learn from a critical thinking course is as soon as you attack the person and not the argument, you've lost. It's an ad hominem attack. So anyone who invokes your race, your gender, your sexuality has already lost the argument.